Welcome everyone to this new episode of the Privacy Rules PrivacyEspresso series. The episode of today is a special one, as it is part of a special series where we will be discussing about building a unified compliance strategy within the very difficult EU framework. And in particular, we will focus in GDPR, NIS2, CRA, and DORA with different experts and in different episodes. And we will conclude this also with a webinar where we will have a Q&A and practical answer and question that you can make to our expert to discuss about this. So let's see this series of episodes as a warm-up to the webinar that is coming in March. And you will find additional detail here together with the link to this podcast episode. Together with me today, I have Stephan Mulders from the law firm based in the Netherlands, Van Diepen van der Kroef Advocaten. And I'm very pleased to have him with us because we are going to open with a very general overview, or let's say the starting framework, which is the one that we all know about, which is GDPR. But we will focus on it to understand how is this connected to the other frameworks that we mentioned. So first of all, Stephan, thanks a lot for being with us today.
Thank you for having me here, Alessandro. It's always a pleasure to be in your podcast. So that's really nice.
Great, Stephan. As you know, in our podcast, we have always very little time frames. So I would like to immediately ask you, to start on the discussion by providing us with an initial overview on the relation between GDPR and the other mentioned frameworks that are NIS2, DORA, CRA. Does GDPR have a role on it? Did GDPR influence them? And, how are those connected? Can you give us an overview on this point?
Yeah, well, the GDPR is the underlying framework for processing personal data. And because most digital information, or a lot of digital information, is personal data, it's actually like the standard that came first. And the GDPR also requires a lot of, already implements a lot of requirements that you also see in the DORA, the NIS2, and the CRR. A little bit less in the CRA, but in any case, in DORA and NIS2, you need to perform proper data mapping. You need to do vendor management, incidents. You need to report. So basically, a lot of companies who did extensive GDPR compliance work already have the basic things to implement the NIS2 or DORA. The point is that NIS2 and DORA contain a little bit more specific requirements for specific sectors. So it's not really the same, but GDPR is a good basic level that you will need to implement the other two laws.
So I understand it's a good starting point. Is not all about GDPR, as many of our listeners sometimes are used to think. But the key point you were raising, I think, is that one of the key differences is that GDPR is personal data related, while the other frameworks tend to speak about a broader set of data that are general sensitive data about, for example, even companies, and not just about personal data. So this is a key point we should be keeping in mind when we deal with them. But you were mentioning already about some similarities and differences, so maybe we can go a bit more through these. Which are, in your expert's opinion, the key similarities and differences between GDPR and the other mentioned frameworks?
Well, all the three frameworks require that you have some sort of ICT management, risk management. So the GDPR has a very loose term. You need to take appropriate measures depending on the risk you perceive. But DORA and NIS2 have more specific requirements about that you need to actually calculate risk and make sure that you take proper measures to mitigate the risk. So that's one. Second is that you need incident reporting. So the GDPR says if personal data is involved in an incident, you need to notify the authorities and in a lot of cases also the data subjects. Well, the DORA and NIS2 also require that you actually record the incident and also report them. So but the devil is in the details here. So there are different small nuances here. And a third, and this one is really important vendor management. GDPR introduced this idea of that you're responsible for all the parties that process personal data for you, for processors. And the DORA and the NIS2 extend this. So basically, if you're responsible for all the suppliers and for a lot of the suppliers, there are nuances, and also for the sub-suppliers and those below. And that's like a really big challenge for organizations, because getting your own cybersecurity risks managed is hard. But knowing what your vendor does and where he does it, it's really hard. It's a challenge for a lot of companies.
Perfect. Thanks a lot, Stephan. I think one of the relevant and interesting point among the three that you listed is that basically it looks like NIS2 and DORA regulations somehow help also understanding which are those famous appropriate technical and organizational measures that GDPR was asking for. I mean, probably they goes a bit deeper, but of course it can be even for companies that was just to comply with GDPR. They might have a look at which are the requirements in the other frameworks to have an understanding on what the EU is asking companies to do. Of course, with the balance depending on what type of data you are dealing with internally. But of course, it's also interesting to see that the level of accountability has remained high also with these additional frameworks, and of course that there are, and this is the difficult part, additional reporting boundaries and notification boundaries that are required, which is probably one of the key parts of my next question, meaning how do organizations ensure compliance with those multiple frameworks simultaneously, because there are some that have to deal with at least two of them at the same time, if not more. Can you, I will make the last questions together. So can you also provide any example of, how companies can integrate GDPR, NIS2, DORA, and even CRA, if you had experience on that directly, into their operation effectively?
Yeah, well, basically, as I told, they are complementary to each other to some level. So the starting point is always you need to know what your organization is doing, and whether you do that via with data mapping in the GDPR. If you say, well, I make a register of operating Europa, so that may be a way. Or if you say, well, I do ICT risk management, basically it's the same. You need to know where the data flows, what the risks are. So that's the starting point. I believe that the hard part is, as I told you, vendor management. That's just a really hard thing to tackle. And also companies need to be aware of incident responses, because under GDPR you had just one authority where you need to report incidents, but now there may be multiple. And also sometimes you're not free to report all things, because you can have confidentiality agreements. So you need to be very aware of, do I need to report this incident, and where do I need to report it? And you need to be aware that the other side around is that sometimes if you have an IT incident, it can also be a data breach, and that may require notification to the data subjects. So it becomes a little bit more complicated, but in the basis, I believe that they really complement each other. And I also believe that maybe like one of the best practices is still data minimization, because that's something I've always believed, that something you don't have, they cannot steal from you and cannot pose a risk. So if you actively pursue like strong data minimization strategies, that can actually help you in reducing all the risk and reducing also the compliance work you need to do.
Perfect. And Stephan, just a quick further question on this. Where do you normally start? I mean, whenever you deal with companies that needs to comply with all the framework, do you start checking from GDPR and then you look for the others, the other way around? Which is the most convenient way to do so, in your opinion?
Well, the first question is always what applies. That's just the first thing. I mean, in NIS2, it's complicated to determine whether your company actually is it falls on a NIS2. DORA is a little bit easier, but also under DORA, you also need to take into account that sometimes as a vendor, you can indirectly fall under the DORA. If your customers say, well, we need to be DORA compliant, then you don't have a choice. So that's the first thing. Do I fall under NIS2? Do I fall under DORA? GDPR, you need also need to decide which role you have in the framework. Are you a processor or a controller? So that's the first question. And the second thing is always data mapping. That's the thing. You need to know where the data is, why you're using it, and then you can decide what risks are there and how can I mitigate these risks. So basically, I would start with, does it apply? And then I would start with the data mapping and go on from there.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Stephan. Hearing from you, I think that a key point is also to have a streamlined process, meaning to have someone that has more or less a good understanding on, where are the data, how are they managed. So probably one of the advices is try to since the very beginning have an idea on how things are going to be stored and who is going to support you through the entire process, because having to change too many subjects might make things quite difficult. Yes, please.
And what's a problem is that often you need to cooperate with different expertises. Exactly. I mean, you need to have a legal expert who knows really well how to explain the GDPR or the NIS2 or the DORA and what requirements there are. And you obviously need cybersecurity experts who can implement it and can tell you, okay, these are the technical things that needs to be done. So it requires extensive cooperation between different expertise, and that's also quite hard.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that we've been dealing with a lot within the alliance, meaning find ways to fine-tune between legal and cybersecurity experts. So for everyone having this type of need that wants a centralized and streamlined way to proceed, please feel free to contact Stephan or to contact us. We will be happy to support. But again, that's really the combination between cyber requirements and legal compliance and the support by different type of experts, sometimes even from crisis communication when it is about preparing the right plan. It's essential, and you need to have the view, the overview from since the very beginning. So Stephan, thanks a lot for helping us understanding how to move through those framework, at least from the GDPR perspective. We will see all the audience that we have with us today probably next week with the next episode. We will be focusing on the NIS2, which is again quite difficult one to address. I very much look forward to meet all of them. And Stephan, thanks a lot again for being with us today.
Thank you for having me here, and have a nice day.
Thank you, and see you all. Bye.
Bye.